Hello there, all of you very beautiful people of the interweb. So right now I'm going to do something I've never done before, but have wanted to for a while, and that is review a comic book, a graphic novel, and today I will be reviewing Spider-Man Reign, and yeah. So the format I'm going to try with this is I'm going to say 3 things I really liked about this, and 1 that I didn't. So just though a quick backstory for those of you who don't know what this book's about. And just fair warning, there might be some spoilers, but I'll try and keep it so that I won't say the big twist at the end. But now you know there's a twist at the end. Oh, the day is ruined. Anyways, so I'm going to say 3 things I liked and 1 thing I didn't, but just the backstory of this. So this is a very unique Spider-Man story. It's not like, you know, Peter Parker's a high school student, or he's a teacher, or he's in 20s and 30s, and he's not a young guy anymore. This is Peter Parker as like an old man, you know. This is Peter Parker who gave up being Spider-Man. This is Peter Parker who's just not the same guy he was a long time ago. But you do see parts of, you know, past him in there. Not saying he's corrupt or anything, he's gone evil, I'm just saying. Anyways, so one thing you know should know straight off the bat is that the one thing I really didn't like about the didn't have too much of an issue, but one thing I didn't like about it was Mary Jane dies. You know, that's before this book even happens. Mary Jane dies, and the way they got across doing it, which I can understand why, but she died because Spider-Man's blood wasn't the only radioactive fluid in his body. You know, Spidey had radioactive sperm, which that's a bit ridiculous. I can see why they do it. They did it though, because you know, because of that, Peter Parker, like, you know, takes responsibility for it, and he just feels awful about himself, and because of that, he stops being Spider-Man. And one of the 3 things I loved about this was seeing how much Mary Jane's death has affected him. Like, you will see throughout this story, there's scenes where, you know, Peter's talking to Mary Jane, you know, except Peter looks like this, like, 80-year-old guy, and Mary Jane, she looks, you know, she looks in her 20s, she looks as good as she always has. And the first time I looked at that, I'm like, hey, what the hell? Why is Mary Jane look so young? That's a bit weird. But then, you know, you read a bit further on, and you realize, wait, that's not actually Mary Jane. It's just, you know, he's projecting an image in his mind because he's going a bit crazy. But the thing is, I'm not completely sure how much he actually believes Mary Jane's there, because he knows she's dead, but he acts like there's some piece of him that not necessarily believes she is, but wants to. Like, there are scenes where, you know, you see he's clearly, he's talking to her just like she's real. Like, he brings her home a flower one time when she hasn't been there in forever. Stop living. And then there's also a scene that was really interesting where, you know, he has to get out of town, you know. Danger's going to happen, so he's packing up his stuff, and then he starts yelling at Mary Jane. He's like, hey, come on, pack your stuff. We have to go now. Why aren't you going? All that stuff. And he's getting all worked up because his dead wife, who isn't actually there, is not leaving. And I found that interesting, just seeing how his mind's changed a bit. Another thing I love, one of my favorite things about this story, is essentially the Reign, for those of you who don't know, is this, basically this militarized police force. Like, think like, sort of like 1984, well, not 1984, but just like some strict police. I almost want to say Nazis, but not nearly that extreme. But basically, if you commit any crime, like if there is a child spray painting, the Reign will kick that kid's ass. They do not take things lightly. They will just beat you up for almost nothing. And it's, of course, that's an injustice, you know? That's not how, you know, police are supposed to work. It's really interesting because you see characters like Peter Parker a bit, but then also mostly the main guy that stands up against the Reign isn't Spider-Man. It's J. Jonah Jameson. He, you know, starts handing out these illegal newspapers, and he's spreading the word and everything, and he gets all these children rallying behind him, trying to rebel against the Reign, you know, take the city back. And I love the idea of rebellion, not necessarily rebellion as in like, oh, we're going to smash things down, but Star Wars, sort of like the Star Wars rebellion, you know, where it's you're fighting to make things good again, you know, the way things used to be. And I love that. I really, really enjoyed. And another thing I liked was Peter Parker. You know, it's interesting to see him as an old man, as I said, but it's more. He's changed more than just him. You know, seeing Mary Jane. He's also become a much more, I don't want to say a weak old man, but he's just stopped fighting. Like, he'll be pushed around and he'll just get up and walk on, you know, mostly because he's no longer Spider-Man. But there's a scene where JJ, you know, comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, Peter, I found your mask forever ago, you know, back at the Daily Bugle, and I know you're Spider-Man, why don't you go out and fight and everything?" You know, Peter just slams the door in his face. It's not until JJ intentionally gets himself, you know, attacked by the rain that Spidey comes out and puts on his mask and, like, fights them. But I want to say, when he does fight them, it is so badass. It's this 80-year-old, I don't know how old he is, but he looks around 80, 90 maybe. He's an old man. He's skinny as hell. And he's just beating up these, you know, these big, muscly guys, and he's just taking them out like it's nothing. And, yeah, so yeah, I hope that was a good review. It's my first comic review, as I said. I personally really enjoyed this book. It's gotten mixed reviews, but I liked it a lot, and it's also interesting to see other characters aside from Peter Parker, not to spoil anything, but other characters come back into the story. So, yeah, tell me what you think in the comments below, both of the book and of my review. If I were to do comic reviews in the future, how could I improve? And, because I'm very new to this. So, yeah. Tell me what you thought of the book and of me, and I'll talk to you later next Thursday. Goodbye, YouTube. Boop! Spider-Man.